This week's surveillance report covers Apple quietly downgrading a key privacy feature with Google not so far behind. Chrome killing popular ad blockers for good, sweeping new surveillance bills in Canada and the UK, the Arch Linux R spam saga, and the usual defense bulletin of data breaches, threats, and FOSS updates. Welcome everybody to the Techlore Surveillance Report, your essential weekly tech news, delivering deep analysis on the latest threats to security, privacy, and digital freedom, empowering you to reclaim control and defend your rights. Let's get into it. So we're going to start with Apple doing something that is very unfortunate. So Apple has a feature called Hide My Email. This is the most mainstream version of something like Simple Login or ADIO. The concept is that when you're signing up for something, it's literally just going to forward the email to whatever you're using on your Apple account. So the nice thing thus far about this feature is that it actually keeps the iCloud.com domain. So let's say that, it's henry@icloud.com is your Apple account and you're using Hide My Email and you're generating random stuff. It's going to do like these random numbers at iCloud.com, and Apple will automatically take those emails and forward them. So that way you can hide your email from all these random accounts out there that want to harvest it for naughty things. The problem though is that they left a note to developers that in the coming weeks, they're going to move those generated email addresses to a new domain. It's a subdomain, which is private.icloud.com, making it easier for apps and websites to know that an email address is private and block users from signing up. I want to be clear, this doesn't change the privacy or security of the service per se. What this does is something that is historically something that all of you know is a problem. When you start using some privacy and security tools, you realize that websites have proactively tried to block you from existence for just trying to be more private online. This is most egregiously seen with something like phone numbers. You don't want to have all of your accounts tied to a central identity that potentially is even tied to your social security number and your everything else just because of a phone number. So you go ahead and purchase a service like MySudo or Google Voice or really anything out there. And you realize all these accounts are like, we don't want that. We don't trust you. And it's like, well, I don't trust you with my phone number either. In fact, I haven't seen any legislation like this, but I think one of the most important things that we need to be fighting for, which is upstream of privacy, is the right to be able to use accounts using any other provider. This ties most into something like the DMA and the concept of interoperability. But if you use something different than iCloud or Gmail, you should have equal amount of rights to the service as somebody using those other platforms. When you're registering for an account that doesn't like your simple login address, if they are allowing a Gmail address but not a simple login one, I would argue that's like discriminatory practices against people who don't use big tech providers. It's penalizing people for not using a big tech company, which I think is inherently unfair. I'd love to see some digital rights push where it doesn't matter which service you're using. They're not allowed to say, we're not going to accept you because you're not using the service we want you to be using, which I think is quite unfair. Now, people are speculating, and TechCrunch even says that Apple did turn over the real account information of a user who generated an anonymized email address. It's important to remember these things aren't like end-to-end encrypted. You're trusting Apple when you do this. That is how all aliasing services are going to work. You are pretty much shifting trust away from having to upload your real information to hundreds of websites to instead having one person essentially take over. Ultimately, though, I will expect to see more sites start to block this subdomain, which means that if you are using Hide My Email, this could be a big hit to your usability in the coming future. So if you are concerned about this, lots of the other open source alternatives that I talk about on this channel not only have different domains that you can try, which sometimes aren't blocked, but also you can combine them with a custom domain. And when you use it with a custom domain, then it's going to be really hard to block those services. So that's where I would push a lot of you out there who are caught by this. Now, on the topic of Apple, this is just a quick signal boost, and there wasn't a better place to put this, but there is a new unpatchable flaw in Apple chips, older chips, that open the door for maybe an iPhone jailbreak, which also means that they are just vulnerabilities. So it's kind of this catch-22, but it's for older A12, A13 chips released in 2018, 2019. It's in older phones like the XS, XR, and up to the iPhone 11. I don't think this is the kind of thing that's like, if you have these phones, you need to throw them in the trash, but I think it's a good reminder that if they're starting to find these things in your old devices, you're probably starting to look at an end-of-life device, and you're probably going to start to find much better security improvements by upgrading to a newer phone. So you don't have to get the newest phone. I still recommend getting secondhand if you can to avoid e-waste, but either way, just keep this in the back of your mind. It's more of a reminder that these older devices are starting to show their age. And don't worry, if you're in the Android or Google side of things laughing, Google also did something not so great this week because they are notifying advertisers that they will start using IP addresses for ad measurement and personalization across the European Economic Area, the UK, and Switzerland on or shortly after August 3rd, 2026. Really, the concern here is things like fingerprinting, and they put this so well in Bleeping Computer, actually, because Google literally has taken the view that this is wrong. In 2019, this is a direct quote, Chrome engineer director Justin Shah wrote that fingerprinting subverts user choice and is wrong because users cannot clear it the way that they can clear cookies. Google has reversed that stance in December 2024, dropping its prohibition on fingerprinting for advertisers. So that should tell you everything you need to know. It tells you why Google Chrome doesn't really have great fingerprinting resistance. It tells you why Google's open to using your IP address for tracking you across advertisers. And it's just a sad update. I wish that Google had some kind of, I guess, floor to how low they would go, but they will continue to push how much they collect about users because ultimately their main business model is advertising. I think the most actionable thing, they do say that you can decline non-essential cookies, you can do the consent prompts, review ad personalization settings in your Google account. Of course, you can always hide your IP address by using something like a VPN or even using things like Tor, which is more advanced. It's weird, but I guess not so surprising that Google is starting to go this direction. And so I hope to see a little bit more pushback. And if you know friends or family, this is a good story to share with them to get them to maybe think a little bit more about the privacy implications. Coming next, though, there is Google Chrome, which is going to end popular ad blockers. And we also have Canada and UK with sweeping new surveillance laws that we're going to talk about, as well as some weird stuff happening on the Arch Linux side of things and our typical defense bulletin and all that stuff. All right, so this requires a bit of context. So there is an underlying technology behind every extension you use inside of your browsers, and it's called Manifest. Now, V2 is what a lot of people are familiar with, even if they're not familiar with it, because a lot of people don't think about this when they're installing an extension. But anytime you've used an ad blocker up until the last couple years, things just work, right? But what Google has put forward is Manifest V3, which is the newer update to this, but it's a lot more limiting and it restricts what extensions can do inside of your browser. Now, Google says it's for better security and for better permissions, etc. But a lot of people think that a lot of these decisions were made to make it harder to do ad blocking. Keep in mind, this is Google, who is mostly an advertising company, who owns a browser, who owns YouTube, who has a lot of incentive to not make ad blockers work. And so when they make this kind of decision and they're also deciding the technologies of the extensions in every Chromium-based browser, that's a bit of a conflict of interest in my mind. The main ad blocker that a lot of people are upset about, which speaks to this whole phenomenon, is uBlock Origin, right? So uBlock Origin is always very powerful, but they've had to retire the old extension on Google Chrome for uBlock Origin Lite, which is compatible with MV3, but it's nowhere near as powerful. Now, Chromium up until now still has had some way, shape, or form to run these older extensions. The most latest thing was that you can have this flag, which is the K extension Manifest V2 disabled flag, which you can essentially still enable. But now there is a Chromium commit that you can see in the show notes that actually gets rid of that flag entirely. The Googler confirmed that they intend to let that go. 9to5 rightfully says this will impact other Chromium-based browsers like Edge and Opera as well. Now, what I'm very curious about is wonder, because Brave browser and I think Vivaldi as well have committed to supporting MV2 for as long as they can. So that's why you can still install some of these older extensions in those browsers. But I'm curious what their way of doing that was. If they were just pretty much, using this flag workaround and then Chrome's going to remove that, they're going to have to put in a lot more work to maintain it. But if they already found a way to maintain it in a, easy path forward kind of way that's, sustainable, then maybe we'll still get that feature. So I guess we'll see what happens. I think really the way that Brave gets around it, at least, is they just build in the ad blocking straight into the browser. So you don't need an extension. So we'll see what happens. This is still new. It's unfolding. And once it happens, we're going to learn more about it. So stay subscribed and I'll cover it on the podcast. Coming soon, we have Canada and the UK pushing sweeping new surveillance laws, as well as some crazy stuff happening in the R for Arch Linux users. But before then, we have the sponsor of this episode, EASYOPTOUTS. Now, EASYOPTOUTS is what I still personally use for my data removal. If you've ever looked up your name, your address, or information about your friends or family online in a search engine or a people searching website and you found invasive stuff about them, that's because of the data broker industry and these people searching websites sharing data all without your consent and without without really much control. Typically, taking control of it means going to all of these sites manually and opting out yourself. It is a pain in the butt. While it does work, it's something that's quite unsustainable, as you can opt out today, but if your information keeps appearing, you have to keep doing it over and over. These data removal sites are great because they automate that process for you, but historically, they are a bit mixed on how well they work, or they're too expensive. But Easy Opt-out solves all of those problems. It's literally $20 a year. That's right, a year, not a month, a year. They've also been verified by Consumer Reports to be tied for the most effective data removal service alongside Optory. When people ask me for a tool to remove their information from these sites, Easy Opt-outs is pretty much always what I recommend. So that is my genuine recommendation. Check them out down in the description. Thank you, Easy Opt-outs, for sponsoring the podcast. And now let's get into the juicy stuff. This is a very, very lightweight update from the EFF, but Canada has put forward this surveillance bill called BC22. It has a lot of concerns. It pushes for requirements for metadata retention. It expands information sharing with foreign governments. It establishes a mechanism that allows them to demand that companies create backdoors, effectively breaking encryption. The downstream consequences of this are pretty crazy. It's rare to actually get lots of people to agree on something. We have Citizen Lab, we have the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, we have the EFF. We literally have signal and big tech companies like Apple and Google and VPN providers who all oppose this bill. This is like everybody coming together and going, this is actually just a bad idea, period. We don't want to do this. It is awful. Now, this is just a very quick update that's saying that they are still moving on with this. It hasn't passed yet, but they are still considering it. They're still forging ahead with the concept without any kind of serious debate. If you are in Canada, this is something to really follow, and make sure you're contacting your representatives, not just for yourself, but also because every domino that falls in this battle is really bad for the global situation. And we're going to talk about this as well, because the next story is literally the UK. Everybody's inspired from Australia's failed ban. Australia came forward and said, we're going to ban social media from children, but the results have been catastrophic. Children are getting around it. They haven't actually demonstrated any kind of effectiveness, and all at the cost of this weird kind of gatekeeping of the internet of who can access what information, all while ignoring the root issues of these exploitive companies at the root of all of it. But the UK looked at it and went, this sounds like a wonderful idea. Let's try it as well. It'll probably go a lot better for us. So, all right, I'll calm down a little bit here. So pretty much they plan to also ban social media for under 16s. I think this quote here is so fascinating from Starmer. It says, this is not something I do lightly, and I will not present it as cost-free, as if social media has brought no benefits to young people, because clearly that is wrong. But government is always about choices, and it's clear to me that a total ban is the right choice. That last sentence really pisses me off, because the government is about choices, and it's clear to me that a total ban is the right choice. I would say that the right choice is allowing parents to decide whether or not they want their own children on these platforms. And I think that people should have the choice to be able to use a social media platform that doesn't exploit them. What these governments are doing right now is saying your choice is either we ban these platforms and require age verification across the whole internet, which is its own privacy nightmare for both children and adults, and then we just have people access the platforms anyway, or go to even worse platforms that aren't going to regulate whatsoever. Or the other alternative is, let's actually hold these freaking companies accountable and make them safer spaces so that kids can actually go there. Social media, as little as I like to use it, is ultimately a very important part of socialization in the internet today. It's how humans connect. I don't like it, but I think it is kind of how the world works right now. I'm not going to try to get around that. And I think that this is, kind of the equivalent of saying, oh my God, the parks are dangerous, so let's just ban the kids from going to parks altogether and have them just stay at home. It's like, no, why don't you actually go to the freaking parks, make them safer, and that way kids can go to the parks. I think that's, it's not the same. Parks are public property, social media companies are private, I know, but I think this overall concept of we need to ban kids from this technology that actually can be completely mundane, safe technology. I think that's what I'm hung up on, is that there's absolutely nothing that's inherently actually bad about, sharing videos. If you went to Techlore.tv, our PeerTube server, which we host, there is nothing there that's exploitive. You can access it via RSS. It doesn't require an account. It's open source. We self-host it. There's no weird advertising surveillance economy industry behind it. Like, sharing videos and publishing videos has nothing that's inherently bad about it. And it's the same thing with social media. There's nothing inherently bad about just sharing something that happened about your day with other people who want to hear about it. The problem is these companies at the root of all of it are doing everything possible to exploit children and adults as much as they can, because that's what they're incentivized to do through algorithms, through data collection, through surveillance stuff. That is what they're incentivized to do. They should be going to these companies directly, making them behave because they're the one causing problems, not children, and make them actually create safe environments for children and hold them liable and have a freaking backbone so that when children inevitably access these platforms anyway, they're actually using a safe platform. That is all I have to say about it. This pisses me off. Check out the show notes to learn more. And the third article is kind of just a little bit more information about what this actually looks like and how they're going to require ID or face scans before you can access social media accounts as a result of all of this nonsense. It makes me so mad. I will 100% be keeping you guys all updated on this. So make sure to stay subscribed to the podcast. There will be updates on this, so it's only a matter of time before we learn more. And if you're in the UK, please demonstrate your disapproval with this and why you don't think it's a good idea. You guys, we need to speak up for this. This is a global fight. Pretty soon we have the defense bulletin with a lot of stories, but right before then I have a quick one about Arch Linux. So Arch Linux is a Linux distribution. If any of you use Arch, by the way, by the way. Now, there is one of the most powerful things about Arch, which is the R, the AUR, and it's a user-contributed repository. It's like the Apple App Store, but completely open, and it lets anybody kind of publish whatever the hell they want. Now, it's not that lawless. They do kind of go in and make sure that nothing's wrong. They thought it was actually 400 packages that were compromised with malware in the R, but it ended up being more than 1,500 packages. Now, that's what happened on June 12th, but on June 14th, there was literally another sophisticated malware attack. Just is meant to be more obfuscated than the original one. Guys, this honestly freaks me out, and it should freak you out. I think that anybody who is using Arch or the R and glosses over this doesn't really appreciate the real risks they're taking when you're downloading this. It is very clear at this point in time that as amazing as the Arch and the R maintainers are, this is a genuine problem. This isn't inherently even an issue with R or Arch specifically. This could happen with a lot of different things, but this is the trade-off when you don't have a well-resourced gatekeeper that's in your court that cares about the fact that you're not going to have malware on your device. And I think that's where, options like F-Droid on the Android side of things are actually a really good middle ground, right? Like F-Droid is on your team, but they also are in some ways a gatekeeper. They verify every app actually does what it's supposed to do. They verify it's open source. They verify there's no weird stuff happening and contacting weird domains. And ideally, part of that, they're able to flag if there's anything crazy suspicious inside of the application. If it was me and I was using the R, I would seriously be reconsidering using something that's strictly community-based, and I would try to look for ways to get more of my software from the official developer as much as I can. But that's always the way I've felt about it, and I think that's something that more people should think about when they're thinking about where they're getting their software from. If you do use the R for anything out there, please look into this to see what the packages were. Make sure you didn't install them. And a lot of these resources in the show notes will actually tell you what to do if you did install that infected software. But please, don't just latch onto the R. This is something that you need to think about when it comes to any kind of community crowdsourced, software installation. You always need to trust the other person on the other side. It's the same reason I say I don't consider the Flatpak an actual way to use Signal on desktop for Linux, because I'm not going to trust some random community maintainer to be pushing out the next update for Signal for me. It's the same philosophy, same concern, just different way of expressing itself. So just think about software installation. It's a really important thing. All right, and now we're going to get into the defense bulletin, starting with our first subsection, the data breaches. So we have the first data breach, which is that the Texas government allowed hackers to steal 3 million driver's licenses and passports. So if you are in Texas, make sure to look into this to see if you were in any way impacted and what the kind of mitigations are in the show notes. We also have LastPass. Fortunately, nowhere near as crazy as their last data breach in 2022, but they did confirm a new data breach in a Clue supply chain attack. Now, there's good and bad news here. The good news is that there is no kind of password, vault kind of data breach here, but it did leak a lot of customer names, phone numbers, email addresses, physical addresses, and support court case information. And I think the real concern here is downstream impacts of that. So now those people can be phished, so they can get emails pretending to be LastPass to access their vault, social engineering attacks. And hey, like one of these names and phone numbers could be for somebody who is like, really well known, a public figure, and then you have their phone number attached to them. Please proceed with caution if you are still in any way, for whatever reason, considering LastPass. Their history at this point is not the strongest. And I'm also going to include the actual hack of the clue side of things in the show notes as well, so you can actually see how that upstream hack worked and who else they targeted and everything related to that. So check that out in the show notes if you want to learn more about the supply chain aspect of things. And then we also had iRhythm that's disclosed a data breach. It's a cardiac monitoring service. It's been used to analyze it says 2 billion hours of curated heartbeat data from 12 million patients. So check this out if you want to learn more. We also had Kodak that's confirmed a data breach claimed by Shiny Hunter's extortion gang. They said they only accessed limited amount of data in the incident. And so if you want to learn more and you're a customer of Kodak, definitely check that one out. We also had 404 that did some coverage over Madison Square Garden, who apparently had a data breach. Based on what I can see, this is less of a customer data breach and more of like the business data breach and their kind of internal secrets. So I don't think this is going to impact many of you out there, but I still wanted to flag it as a story. And this one was, I think, one of my favorite stories, actually. This is a whole blog post that I highly recommend you all read. This is one of those, just like, if it was the old surveillance report, this would have been a misfit. It was just crazy. Pretty much this guy accessed literally everything inside of FIFA's World Cup portal. So they could see all the streams going on. They could literally do their own stream. They could have played whatever they wanted that would have ended up on live television. They got in and it was super easy to get in, and they fixed it very secretly after they contacted them over the problem, but they documented everything in a wonderful blog post. They could have stopped the streams. It is so crazy. It also has all the stats, analytics. Guys, if you're watching the video, you can see all the stuff this person was able to access. It's all the internal workings of the World Cup. So check it out to learn more. This is a really entertaining one to read. I think it's a really shareable one too. All right, now we're going to go into the threat section. This is essentially just things you should know that could impact your safety. So the first thing is that there was a 40 sandbox flaw that's now being exploited in attacks. This has to do with Fortinet. And so if you're using Fortinet, that's something that you should look into. And then up next, we also have some WordPress plugin attacks, which are also a weekly occurrence at this point. And this one is Gravity SMTP. It's a flaw that impacts it. And it's been addressed in the newest version. So make sure you update that. Don't worry though, because there was another one called Shared Plugin, which is actually a supply chain attack. So if you updated to the newest version of Shaped Plugin, it also affected other plugins like Product Slider Pro, WooCommerce, Real Testimonials, and Smart Post Show Pro. God, every week we're covering so much of these WordPress plugin attacks. And so if you use WordPress, I hope you're keeping up with this podcast. Now, next up, we have Microsoft working on the Defender patch for Rogue Planet 0 Day. This was also from Nightmare Eclipse. We've been covering Nightmare Eclipse also on a weekly basis, but they are apparently working on this. This was a vulnerability disclosed last week, and apparently they're working on a fix, which should come out soon. This is a really important one to flag for you, your friends, your family, anybody who it could impact. For Windows and Linux users, the deadline to update secure boot keys is coming. This is for June 24th, which is, I guess, probably about the time you're all listening to this. 3 certificates that cryptographically verify that each piece of firmware and software that loads during system boot are going to expire. Machines that fail to update these keys will continue to function, but they no longer are protected against new threats. You can check the status on Windows machines. You can open Windows security settings, device security, and secure boot, and a green checkmark means the update has been completed. Most Windows machines automatically update the keys during regular monthly patch distributions, but older machines may require manual attention. Linux users have to watch for release of the new shims. Microsoft recommends people stay current with all firmware updates. So this is mostly something that impacts people if they're not keeping their systems up to date. Check out the show notes to learn more. And we also have a critical Copilot vulnerability that allowed hackers to steal 2FA code from users. This is one of countless issues with Copilot over the years. So this is just the newest one. If you want to learn more, we don't have a huge amount of time today, but that is something that you should check out, especially if you're using Copilot. This is a must read. Otherwise, I'm sure most of you aren't using it. Apple has fixed a Beats Studio Buds flaw that let hackers spy on conversations using it. This is already patched, and it apparently is automatically delivered to vulnerable headphones when they are paired and within Bluetooth range of your iPhone, iPad, or Mac. So that should be taken care of, and you can definitely learn more in the show notes. This is also a very quick flag, but apparently last week AMD, the chip company, was going to strip some protections when it came to encryption on their chips against physical attacks. It's known as TSME. There was a lot of backlash, and so they have now reinstated memory encryption in consumer CPUs. Check out the show notes to learn more. Overall, seems like it's been handled, but it's weird that it had to get that far. All right, now we're going to get into the open source section. FOSS Plus. I think genuinely everything this week is open source, I believe. So we have Tor browser 15.0.16. This is pretty much just some security updates. I don't see anything that is like a massive update here, but if you do use Tor browser, make sure you're running the latest version. We also have Mozilla that launched Firefox 152 with the revamped settings, JPEG XL support, and easier tab muting. Overall, very welcome changes. I've seen the UI overhaul, and I think it looks pretty good. Now, they've also introduced something called the Firefox Roadmap, which is actually really cool. If you're watching the video, they actually detail what they're working on for the future, which I think is really nice. It's transparent and people can follow along to see what features they really want to see or if they're going to come to fruition. So things like tab groups on mobile, PDF editor improvements, VPN on mobile, private window update, containers, ad blocking, AI done differently. Like they pretty much detail all the things they're doing and what they're going to be working on. I think it's a good move, so that's really awesome to see. We also have Tails 7.9, which everybody should update as well, especially if you're using Tails. You want to always be on the latest version, and it also includes that earlier Tor browser update, which includes its own security improvements. Graphene, the Android ROM, has said they have fully ported to Android 17. The article says it's going to be available soon. It includes the Pixel 6a, 7, 7a, 8, 10a, and 10 Pro Fold. We also have another mobile OS, Postmarket OS, which is version 26.06, launching with GNOME 50, KDE Plasma 6.6, FOSS.0.55, and improved booting. And there's lots of other changes as well if you use Postmarket OS and you want to learn more. Now, KDE Plasma 6.7, the desktop environment, has also released, and it adds per-screen virtual desktops, union theming system, and Wayland updates. So definitely check it out if you want to learn more. And then AltStore PAL is now available in Brazil as Apple enables alternative app marketplaces. So now you're going to get access to the same third-party app store as Europeans have had access to. So congrats to Brazil for following along. And hopefully we can see more countries embrace third-party app stores and we can see AltStore PAL end up on those as well. The last news for the week is Proton, who's released an easy switch for business to help companies move away from Google. It's exactly what it sounds like. They just released a similar feature for individuals. And so it's just an easier way if you have a small business to migrate to Proton. All right, everybody, that is going to conclude this week's Techlore Surveillance Report. If this analysis helped you reclaim control, you can become a Techlorian by visiting the link in the show notes. That's how you gain access to our exclusive community on Signal. You also get other fun perks like my private RSS feed, which I update throughout the week, even while I'm traveling. If you were in the RSS feed, you probably saw those updates. So you do get all of the things that I'm tracking throughout the week. So you don't have to wait for every episode to see what's going on in the world, and you just track one RSS feed to keep it simple for you. If you don't want to help the podcast grow that way, you can still help it grow by just leaving a rating. You can share the episode with people you know, leave a comment, engage how you can, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, wherever. Just help out however you feel is helpful. Otherwise, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of Surveillance Report. It's always a pleasure to be here, and it's good to be back, and I'll see you all next week.